His legs hurt. This has been his usual response. His doctor recommended increasing the dosage of his meds. T-Sun lost interest in finding where things went wrong. After the consultation with the doctor, a nurse guided him to his room. He clearly remembered that when he woke up, everything was already over. T-Sun was half paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair. On the way to his room, he did not miss the sympathetic gazes of other people. In his mind, this was the only thing he had. Also, the unfortunate truth of being half paralyzed. This was our MC, a kid named T-Sun. T-Sun's paralysis was a result of a car accident caused by drunk driving. He had just gone to a convenience store to pick up some beers and snacks, but he was suddenly blinded by the lights coming from a fast-approaching car. Our MC was stunned and was thrown into the air. The next thing he knew, he was in a hospital. The nurse helped T-Sun to his bed where he continued to lament. He was left with an illusionary pain in his legs, as if they were being cut off. The only thing our MC could depend on right now was the medications that were given to him. He remembered the saying that God only gives us trials we can endure. But in his mind, he would have just rather died. There was nothing much T-Sun could do in his confinement. The most he could do was read novels. In a dimly lit room, he read a novel titled Magician Who Dominates the World on his phone. He feels comfort whenever he reads a novel with a happy ending. T-Sun was almost finished with the novel. He was sure he would be able to finish it that night. The novel ended with a magician named Aiden destroying the old world and creating a new world to his taste. The new world consists of people who have lost their memory and now live a happy life, even those with traumatic deaths. T-Sun finished the novel and felt terrible, as the novel he had chosen to read also had a bad ending. Our emotional MC cried, questioning why he can't just be happy. He then stopped himself from feeling bad about the novel. He was reminded that something like a happy ending will never be achievable for him. T-Sun then went to sleep after yet another disappointing day. But then a bright light appeared all of a sudden. This notification appeared. T-Sun abruptly woke up. He thought that he was just having hallucinations. But he was no longer in his hospital room. He's in a medieval-looking room with wooden fixtures. He figured he was dreaming and looked for his phone. And as he tried to stand up, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the basin of water beside his bed, and was shocked when he saw someone else's face. The realization that he possesses a different body came soon after to him. A mysterious message appeared before T-Sun. He looked closely at the screen. It stated that he was in the world of Magician Who Dominates the World, and that he must live as the character Mord Vernars. T-Sun realized that it was the novel that he was reading the previous night. Mord Vernard was an extra in the novel. Another message then appeared that said, if Mord dies, he would die too. As the realization settled in, T-Sun began to take stock of his new environment. This new identity has also given him the ability to stand on his feet again. After that, the notifications appeared again. The system has given him all of Mord's memories. Even the language inside this world was registered. This gave him a bit of a headache, and after a few more seconds, he was able to tap into Mord's memories. Everything was flowing into his mind. He saw how this character lived his life, and how it ended inside the novel. Mord Vernars is a son of the Archduke Vernars family. He was an illegitimate son of the Vernars family's patriarch. This character was too powerful. Even if the whole team of the protagonists was about to fight him head-on, no one could guarantee that they could win. Mord was just defeated because the protagonist ambushed him while he was undergoing a ritual to gain control of his psyche. This sudden death proved that he was just an extra inside this novel. T-Sun wondered why he had become Mord. Another message appeared that said he must change the fate of destruction of this world, and if he was successful, his wish would be granted. Our MC stared at this message for a while. He then figured that the system wanted him to protect the world, in place of the protagonist who destroys the world in the end. T-Sun then cleared his thoughts for a bit to analyze everything. This scenario right now could only be a dream, because he was already tired of living his normal life. But this guy didn't really care about it too much, as he no longer had the desire to live his life of being half paralyzed. If this was really a dream, he wouldn't want to wake up anymore. He no longer cared if this was God's prank or something. And if he could really change the fate of this world, The wish he wanted to be granted was to be able to get his body back from before the accident. This was his ultimate mission right now. Taesung has all the information about this novel called Magician Who Dominates the World. On top of that, he reincarnated as one of the most powerful characters inside this novel. Our MC was now determined to do his best with this chance that he got. Taesung, a half-paralyzed kid, was now ready to live his life as Mord. Mord Vernars is an illegitimate child of the Archduke Vernars family. He was also unaware about the identity of his mother. This led him to live a difficult life. Having his mother died a few days after he was born, Mord was called the child who killed his own mother. All the children who grew up alongside Mord bullied him because of this incident. But Mord had a turning point in his life. Those of the Vernars bloodline awakened powers when they turned 15. They called it New Blood Awakening. They had to endure pain as if their entire body was burning in flames. But after that, they were gifted with immense powers. For someone outside of the Archduke family, the chances of surviving the New Blood Awakening are less than 1 in 5. Nonetheless, Mord survived and obtained immense powers. Mord's mother left a letter that read, if he survives his 15th birthday, he should head to the Archduke Vernars family. And he did just that. He went to the Vernars residence. He agreed to take a test in order to be acknowledged by his father. Taesung, having Mord's memories, figured that the timeline he must be in was after Mord arrived at the Archduke Vernars family residence for the test. He recalled that Archduke Vernars is one of the main antagonists of the novel. This family already has a lot of children with direct bloodlines, so it was unlikely for Mord to be accepted. The Archduke took advantage of Mord's desire to be acknowledged as his son, so he raised Mord to be his hunting dog. And according to the novel, no one really managed to find out how strong Mord actually was. His strength was nearly immeasurable. As a reader of this novel, our MC would also want to know more about Mord's powers and abilities. And while he was busy with his thoughts, someone called his attention. This man was the one who was about to oversee his examination. Todd was a huge man with a strong build like an instructor should be. Taesung went near this man and found out that he was still bigger than him. From the way Mord talked to him, Todd knew that something was different. He thought that even the eyes of Mord were different from yesterday. He then reminded him of the test he was going to take. This instructor asked our MC if he already had some experience in fighting. Taesung was a bit flustered with the fact that he already had a fight. He was glad either way. Since he wanted to test Mord's powers, Taesung followed Todd to the training area. Todd reminded him to not mention that he was the Archduke's son. This was kind of an unspoken rule for the legitimate children. They were not allowed to let the others know about their identity unless they have already become an official warrior. After some time, they arrived at the training area where a group of men awaited them. Our MC carefully observed the team and realized they wore the same training attire and all looked fit. Taesung assumed that they were warriors as they look a bit too old to be trainees. Todd reminded him that the way a Vernars fight is different from the way an ordinary warrior fights. Taesung knew that and continued by saying that real Vernars use weapons when untrained. But once trained, they only fight with their body. It was already known throughout the content that the Vernars family has the best organization of warriors. And since they were trained with just hand-to-hand combat, they really didn't need any weapons. Our MC recalled that no weapons in this world could overpower the physique of the Vernars. Todd then declared that the test will judge which affiliation Mord will go to and how he shall be trained. He then called on a warrior named Vince who would be Mord's opponent for the test. Vince looked smug as he walked towards Mord. Taesung had a fight with Vince and had to do well, for the results would decide his future as Mord. Vince questioned whether Mord was really 15 given how big he was. He then wondered whose son Mord was, as he tried to provoke him. Taesung looked relieved as he realized that Mord was not the only legitimate child in the Archduke Vernars family. He had no other choice but to take this chance. Our MC knew that he could only achieve freedom in this world with power. Taesung even considered just living a peaceful life somewhere far away in this world. But he had no choice. He was now determined to prove his skills. He immediately advanced to take a punch at Vince. Vince was caught off guard, but he was able to dodge it. He had underestimated Mord, But now he learned that the new guy knew how to fight. In Tison's mind, he was quite happy because his boxing skills that he earned when he was young proved to be useful. Our MC landed multiple hits because his new body was more agile than expected. Vince got to his knees. He admitted that Mord was pretty good at fighting. He then expressed that Mord was not telling the truth when he said he didn't learn how to fight, and that his posture is that of a learned person. Tison then replied that he just copied others. Vince seemed to be threatened by Mord. He immediately advances to him at speed. A bystander warrior was surprised to see Vince using mana. He urged him to stop as Mord was just a kid who hadn't even learned the mana combat technique. Todd, on the other hand, seemed unbothered and told him to let them be. Mord, on the other hand, didn't expect that his opponent would use mana against him. This guy had already charged all the mana on his fist and was about to punch Mord, but his attack was unexpectedly dodged by Mord. Vince was stunned by how the newbie figured out his attack. Tison saw his strike through the mana combat technique. Mord then proceeded to gather mana of his own. He was about to return the favor to Vince. This guy was now confused and scared at the same time, because a newbie like Mord was about to defeat him. Our MC hit Vince with immense power. Blood came out from his mouth. The force was so powerful that it sent him flying. This shocked everyone in the training camp. They never thought that Mord would send an official warrior flying. All of them found out that this guy was too powerful. Our MC then approached Vince. This guy was still out cold from Tison's attack. Tison thought to himself that it would have been bad if he hadn't managed to dodge Vince's last attack. But good thing he was getting used to his power. After a few seconds, Vince moved and he stood up once again. Mord went back to his fighting stance. He thought that warriors were really built differently. Our MC then noticed something. Vince was already at his limit. He was just forcing himself to fight. Meanwhile, the bystanders were wondering how Vince was defeated with just one punch, and where Mord had come from. Tison noticed Vince was not in good condition and asked Todd if that was enough. He then explained that he still did not know how to control his strength and that he might kill him at this rate. In Todd's perspective, he was quite amazed on how things turned out. He was supposed to test out the limits of Mord, but this examination didn't seem to be helpful. Todd seemed to think about it and then agreed to stop the fight. He approached Mord and questioned why he lied about not having learned how to fight. Tison insisted that it was the truth, but Todd did not believe him. He retorted that there was no way he could use mana without having learned it. Tison then told him that he used it for the first time after having a really high fever, but he doesn't know much about it. Todd remained unconvinced. Mord then talked about his experience of the new blood awakening, but the truth was, he was already able to use mana even before he experienced the awakening. That's how talented he was. The god of combat was Vernars, and the goddess of the heavens was Erida. The blood of these two gods exists in Mord's body, creating an incredible synergy, making him a miraculous being. Mord was blessed with his genetics. This guy never even trained until he was 15 years old. In just 7 years, he became stronger than Archduke Vernars, who was known to be the strongest of the successors of the god of combat. This is how terrifying Mord's power was. And this was according to the story. After a little bit of explaining, Todd had no other choice but to believe Mord. He then asked Mord if he knew Vince, to which he answered no. Todd told him that Vince is a Vernars warrior who was trained from a young age and passed a strict test. And right now, Mord has beaten him in just one attack. With that, Todd had given our MC a total of 200 points for this test, even if the maximum was just over 100. Given that Mord was clearly strong and skilled, Todd was having a hard time determining which level he should be. He explained that the Archduke Vernars family has a 3-level curriculum for warriors. If one fulfills the conditions at each level, he advances to the next. If he completes the last level, he is then qualified to be an official warrior. Todd reminded Mord that every level was difficult and a lot of warriors were finding themselves stuck. Mord asked to be put in the first level, to which Todd was dumbfounded. He rationalized his request by expressing his desire to learn combat techniques. Our MC also found out that the other 2 levels would not teach him any of the basics. This made his decision final. Todd did not expect this and assumed that Mord would want to take the test to become an official warrior right away. He then agreed to put Todd in the first level and dismissed him. Todd also added that he will ask someone to pick Mord tomorrow to send him to the first level. T-Sun was back in his room, relieved that the test went smoothly. He wondered if Mord went through the same process, as the novel did not talk about how this guy became Archduke Vernar's hidden card. He thought it made sense since Mord was just an extra. All the novel included was that Mord was used as Archduke Vernar's human weapon. This character had a weak personality. He didn't even try to fight back from his bullies. Our MC then concluded that maybe Mord was also beaten up when he got to the first level of the training camp. T-Sun slowly came to an understanding of why he had to possess Mord. With his original identity as T-Sun, he had always fought against injustice. Meanwhile, Mord lived a life opposite his. He was determined to save the world from destruction. And in order to do that, he has to stop the novel's protagonist, Aiden. In this story, the one who could complete the world fragments which contains the essence of the world would become the supreme god, the magician who dominates the world. Aiden had completed the world fragments and became the being to dominate the world. The result was the destruction of the world. As a god, Aiden did not just kill his enemies. He also ended his friends. As the sun set, our MC was determined to stop Aiden with his plans. T-Sun resolved to completely live as Mord instead of T-Sun. The Archduke Vernar's family is the ruler of a nation called the Principality of Vernars. The Vernars castle, which is at the heart of the nation, was as luxurious as other nations' royal castles. Its training facilities for the warders were situated on the outskirts of the castle, the outer castle's third region. Mord was in a carriage that will bring them to the training facility. He noted that the training facility was bigger than most university campuses. He was then startled by a loud noise coming from the direction they were going. The man sitting beside him noticed his confusion and explained that the sound was probably from the third-level training grounds. Mord was surprised that this sort of sound came from a group of trainees. He figured that trainees must easily surpass a human's limits, given they're on their way to becoming Vernar's warriors. These warriors are said to be capable of merging the powers of multiple people into one. The carriage arrived at the outer castle's third region. It was gray with massive walls and gates. Mord alighted the carriage and was welcomed by the first-level instructor named Hayes. Hayes assumed that Mord had done badly on the test considering he is in the first level right now. Mord corrected him and said that he defeated Vince. Hayes was surprised by this and asked why he was there. Mord then replied that he was there to learn the basics. Hayes was still doubtful but continued to lead Mord to the training area. He then stated that people were in the middle of their training, so it would be great not to distract them. Mord assumed that although it was just the first level, participants must be strong since they were training to become Vernar's warders. Hayes introduced the trainees. Mord got to the first-level training grounds and was surprised that most if not all trainees were just kids. He suddenly regretted not having gone immediately to the third level. Hayes asked Mord if he had never learned the mana combat technique. Mord mentioned that he did not, but he has mana. Hayes told him that that was a given since he's already gone through the new blood awakening. He then proceeded to teach Mord the process of mana, the detection of ether, creation of mana, and collection of it. Mord then asked if he didn't need to learn any combat skills. Hayes then confirmed if he could stay longer, for he could do his request. Mord then clarified it was not what he meant. Hayes knew that all he wanted was to teach him a few things, and that the second-level instructor could just fix it if things were terrible. Mord thanked him. In our MC's mind, learning the basics would be a good foundation to utilize his powers well. After a few minutes, Mord seemed to have mastered the active mana, and it didn't make sense to everybody. His fellow trainees gathered to watch him train, and even noted that his mana could be stronger than the instructor's. Mord was done and asked if that was all he had to do. He couldn't believe that that was it. Hayes, having witnessed that Mord was way too advanced, declared that he just graduated from the first level and moved him to the second level. Hayes then explained that the physical reinforcement lessons at the second level are split into two sublevels. The first is hardening the body to prevent any damage taken if one were to be hit by a carriage. The second is amplifying one's physical abilities so that one can transcend the limits that are reached when training with one's muscles. Physical reinforcement is a very difficult skill that so many trainees fail to achieve. But Mord did not even take more than half an hour to master it. His second instructor also promoted Mord up to the next stage. He explained how easy it was to reach the second level, but it would be different by the third. He then continued by saying that just like Mord, there would be guys that were part of the bloodline in the next level, so graduating from it would be a challenge. Also, the fact that our MC would be facing them without learning any battle skills. The instructor warned him that the third level is not easy and he will have to work hard. Thiessen already knew that the third level would be difficult, but he was excited to meet people with new blood power. It was the next day. In the third level training grounds, rumors of Mord passing the second level in 2 days have already spread. He was also rumored to be of the Vernar's bloodline, just like another third-level trainee called Fionn. The redhead trainee, Fionn, then remarked that Mord probably did not come to the third level right away so he could get the Archduke's attention. He had decided to show Mord that there were ranks within the Vernar's bloodline. Mord arrived at the third-level training grounds, hoping he had just skipped the last 2 levels. He was immediately confronted by Fionn, who introduced himself as Class 2's captain. Fionn mentioned that he was also of the Vernar's bloodline. Mord then introduced himself and said that he was supposed to be part of Class 2, although he does not know for how long. Fionn took offense at this, accusing Mord of thinking their training was a joke. Mord then poured more gas to the flame by saying he wouldn't have come to the place if he thought of it that way. Fionn was literally emitting flames out of annoyance. Our MC even asked him to calm down, as he was not in the mood. Mord, in a light-hearted manner, playfully remarked that he had no need to worry about wetting his pants simply because Fionn tried to intimidate him. Fionn was stunned. He emitted more flames and put emphasis on the fact that he was also in the Vernar's bloodline. Fionn then exclaimed he would kill Mord. Trainees that were watching started to feel sorry for Mord, for they knew their comrade's attitude. Fionn was aiming at Mord, saying that he will make him pay for blabbering. The attack emanated a loud noise and made the dust fly around the grounds. The trainees who were watching assumed that Mord had taken a hit and hoped that he would make it out alive. They were all shocked. One hand was trembling, as if the person was trying to stand up. Mord remained at his place and looked down at Fionn, saying that he was looking forward to seeing how strong he'd be. And as the dust cleared, it revealed Fionn was on the ground. As it turned out, he was nothing more than some village bully with a bloody nose. Fionn expressed an accusation that Mord's successful punch was merely a stroke of luck. Mord corrected him that it was not because of luck but because he was weak. Fionn was enraged and aimed again for Mord. With each punch he threw, Mord was able to dodge them easily. Fionn charged another attack, but it was nothing for Mord. He then used his skill, causing huge amounts of dust to cover the place. Mord was shocked after he realized Fionn was way too weak. While the red-headed Werner hit a wall and passed out, our MC then wondered about his strength. Considering he has not mastered the mana combat technique, then it would be safe to assume that Mord in the novel was more powerful than him. One trainee asked Fionn if he was okay, but the red-headed Werner pushed the trainee aside and declared the battle was not over yet. Mord didn't think it was a good idea, for Fionn already passed out earlier. The red-headed Werner was still too proud to admit that Mord was more powerful than him. Our MC then mocked him and stated that for someone who was training to become a warrior, letting his guard down shouldn't be an option. Fionn got even angrier, to the point he had awakened his power. Trainees surrounding the two got worried. One even suggested Mord to run for his life. It seemed like Fionn was summoning the new blood power, but our MC knew he was not controlling the new blood, but rather, it was his mana. While Fionn was summoning his power, an instructor entered the scene, and instead of stopping the fight, he decided to just let them be, for he wanted to test Fionn's power himself. He then looked at Mord, and realized he was the Vernar's kid that just arrived that day. In the instructor's mind, It wouldn't be a big deal to let one Werner kid die. Fionn casted a skill that left our MC shocked. Fionn utilized an advanced skill that uses the body or a weapon as a vessel to create stronger energy form. This skill was called Body Impulse. Fionn continued to attack using his power, but Mord was able to dodge it. It was an immense force that crushed the ground. Our MC knew it would have been bad for him if he got hit by it. Fionn taunted him to stop running away from his attacks as he struck one powerful punch. Mord followed suit by throwing a punch in response. Fionn's nose started bleeding and cursed at him, and as they continued to fight, Mord was able to dodge all Fionn's attacks. The red-headed Werner was shocked, for Mord was not even using new blood power. The trainees were even more surprised that Fionn couldn't land a single hit. One mentioned that it was the same for Mord, but the instructor disagreed. He was sure Mord hit Fionn, for his impulse decreased. Our MC uttered that it was time to get more serious. Mord proceeded to throw a punch. He was able to hit Fionn on his stomach. Fionn was on the ground, and our MC apologized for hurting him. The red-headed Werner struggled to get up. He then teased our MC for running around. Mord got irritated. Fionn was glad that Mord fell for his mockery. With a swift motion, he directed his punch towards our MC, but Mord was just looking at him. And then an intense clash happened. Our MC caught Fionn's fist and stated that impulse was no use if one was weaker than his opponent. He then told Fionn that it was a good lesson for him. In Fionn's mind, it was common sense for an impulse user to always win against a non-user. Our MC then threw a punch. With astonishing force, Mord's attack pierced through Fionn's body. This red-headed guy realized that he started a fight with someone he could never win. The punch threw him flying to the wall. Mord was just looking at this poor thing, and the red-headed Werner passed out. The instructor was surprised by the fight, questioning where a monster like Mord came from. He could not believe that an illegitimate child defeated Fionn without even using impulse. He then noted that he had trained countless Werners until now, but even a talented illegitimate child couldn't close the gap between themselves and a direct bloodline. Our MC asked the trainees if there was someone else that wanted to fight with him. The instructor ordered for Fionn to be taken to the hospital. He thought to himself that the order of command will fall if he doesn't do anything about this. And in his mind, however excellent Mord might be, he was still a legitimate son with no support system. Hence, he resolved to tame him. Fionn was injured badly from his fight with Mord. He had to stay in the medical center while he was in a coma. Mord, on the other hand, was put on probation for 4 days. Mord was scanning a tactic theory text, but he found it way too easy. Considering that Tsum studied up to graduate school, the written test shouldn't be a problem. Mord was already getting bored from staying in the dorm all day. He then decided to just practice with his monocombat technique, when suddenly, Instructor Todd entered his room. He had heard about the trouble he caused in the third-level training ground. Todd then told him that the Archduke would like to see Mord. Our MC asked why the Archduke wanted to see him. Todd then responded that he would know once they arrived there. He then continued by saying that Mord should act civilized. In our MC's mind, the Archduke Werner himself didn't even like all the etiquettes of aristocracy in the novel. On the way to the Archduke, Todd opened the topic of rumors spreading about Mord. Todd thought of him as a clever kid. He was sure others think the same way too. He asked Mord if his plan all this time was to get the Archduke's attention. Mord then replied that if he wanted the Archduke's attention, he would have just become a very powerful warrior. Todd told him that the Archduke received reports on what happened and took an interest in him. In our MC's mind, destroying a Werners is something worthy of his attention. They were almost at the training grounds of the Archduke, and Todd did not forget to remind Mord to not be conspicuous. They reached the training ground and arrived to witness the Archduke training with a few other men. Mord took notice of the overwhelming aura of power of Archduke Werners. He looked like some muscular giant compared to him. Mord continued to observe the Archduke's training. Multiple men tried to attack him all at once as he stood inside a dome. One punch cracked the shield, and the Archduke immediately ordered his warriors to back off. He then gathered his energy. It turned into a bigger sphere. Archduke Werner raised this force up in the air. Mord recognized the skill the Archduke used. It is an overpowered skill that absorbs both marginal and physical attacks, and turns it into a shockwave that one throws back at the opponent. Archduke hit a wall of the training ground. The skill was known as the God of Combat's Mirror. In Mord's observation, it was still incomplete, but he noticed how strong it already was. The Archduke acknowledged them after a while. Mord and Todd greeted and kneeled before him. The Archduke then told them to get up, as he didn't want to deal with etiquettes. The Archduke approached Mord and expressed that he had heard interesting things Mord has done at the training facility. Now that they were facing each other, Archduke Vernar's looked even bigger and more intimidating. The Archduke then asked him who his mother was, to which he answered Reyna. His Grace then told Mord that he remembered Reyna, and continued by saying that he seemed to take after her more than him. The Archduke heard that Mord won against Impulse with just body reinforcement. He wanted to see how strong Mord was, so he called on someone named Kessner. The Archduke asked him to spar with Mord. He then stated that Mord was his son, and that he wanted to see how strong he was. Kessner was one of the 10 men the Archduke was training with earlier. He then invited Mord into the sparring field, and even told him he could use a weapon if he wanted. But our MC responded that he didn't need one, as he never got to learn how to wield a weapon. He told Kessner he would settle with his fists. The warrior had his doubts. Kessner advanced at Mord right away, but our MC was able to dodge it. Mord noticed right away how powerful and different an Archduke's personnel would be, while Kessner noticed how Mord was able to dodge his attack without using any mana. Kessner kept attacking him. Mord then concluded that this warrior was in another dimension from the guys he fought until now. Our MC was brought to the ground. Kessner complimented his spirit, for he was not giving his all despite being cornered. He decided not to go easy on Mord anymore. Our MC realized Kessner was pulling up his mana, and guessed that he might also be of the Vernar's bloodline. Mord realized that he had never fought with everything he had got since coming there. Since Kessner is close to the Archduke, Mord decided he must be worth giving his all. He then gathered up his mana. The two were facing each other, both emitting powerful energy. The Archduke seemed to be impressed. Kessner saw Mord's mana. Thiessen then assumed that the Mord before probably never maximized all of his potential, since he grew up hearing people call him the child who killed his mater. He probably never had a chance to properly use his powers because of the guilt. Thiessen as Mord was determined to live up to his potential. The two stared intensely at each other. The Archduke's warrior even smirked. Kessner and Mord proceeded to battle with all their might despite the gap between their skills. He then told our MC that he would teach him a lesson. Mord blocked his attack, and Kessner recognized his strength, but he uttered that it was useless. Our mighty MC was thrown into the air. As he fell to the ground, he was sure that he was able to block the warrior's attack. Kessner then immediately went to Mord's direction. Mord was stunned as Kessner made him realize he has a lot to learn. A powerful blow landed squarely into our MC. The impact sent Mord hurtling backward, crashing into the wall. Kessner then stated that he had not started yet. He continued by saying Mord shouldn't disappoint him. Kessner challenged Mord to bring out the best he had. There was such a big gap between his and Mord's abilities, which made our MC wonder if he had to use his new blood power. He decided against it, since Kessner will definitely also use his. Kessner teased Mord, who seemed to be thinking too much. As our MC wiped his mouth because of blood, he then decided not to waste more time, and launched forward to Mord. Our MC prepared to defend himself from the attack. He immediately swung his fist, and blasted the ground to defend his space. Kessner was joyful about the progression, as it seemed like Mord was revealing more of his strength. Mord does not intend on showing him everything he was capable of, but it got too annoying for him to just keep taking hits. So he decided to at least get one attack in. Kessner even noticed how big Mord's movements were. He then brought up that his skills are still beginner level. Our MC blocked one of Kessner's attack. The warrior reminded him that his blocking was no use. In Mord's mind, he predicted Kessner would do that. He was then able to throw a punch that made Kessner move from where he was standing. The powerful Archduke warrior was stunned by the fact that Mord was able to use a double attack. Kessner realized that Mord stole his skill and blocked his attack on purpose. He couldn't believe that he made the double attack skill so quickly. Kessner started to gather his impulse, as their fight started to get more interesting. He then suggested for Mord to give his all. Our MC was joyed to see Kessner using his energy, for he wanted to see his real powers. But the Archduke already put the battle to a stop. He then ordered Kessner to back off. The Archduke approached Mord and praised him for his skills despite only awakening his new blood recently. Then, the Archduke suddenly launched an impulse ball towards Mord, but Mord immediately defended himself. His body couldn't take the power initially and thought of using his new blood power. After a few seconds, he realized that he could do it. As he recalled the fight with Fionn, he was able to use his impulse for the first time even with a beginner-level body reinforcement. Mord gathered his impulse, for he planned to block the Archduke's attack. His grace seemed satisfied with this. Todd, on the other hand, couldn't believe that he can already use impulse. Mord's whole body was lit up. T-Sun also realized that Mord's talents are beyond his imagination. He figured he can copy a skill just by observation. The Archduke was impressed with Mord, and in return, he asked if there was something he wanted as a reward. His grace suggested money no one could ever dream of having. He even mentioned the idea of having a mentor to train him. But our MC already knew what he wanted. He needed to collect the world fragments before Aiden did to stop him from destroying the world. He then stated that he didn't need any of the things the Archduke mentioned. Mord finally told the Archduke that he wanted to challenge the god of combat's grave. There are places called dungeons in the world of magician who dominates the world. Like all dungeons in fantasy realms, they're dangerous places full of monsters. However, this world's dungeons are a bit different as they are symptoms of the other world's erosion. In other words, dungeons form in places where the world and others overlap, and abnormal things happen inside. Most dungeons are overlapped with the demon realm, and this world's monsters are mostly from dungeons. Although, the god of combat's grave, where the god of combat, Vernars, was said to have been created, has nothing to do with overlapping with another world. That is where the world of fragment is hidden. His grace looked at Mord questionably. Our MC noticed his grace's reaction, and thought that maybe he asked too early. The Archduke wondered why Mord wanted to challenge the god of combat's grave. Mord replied that he heard that's where the traces of the god of combat, Vernars, are left behind, and he wanted to see the root of his bloodline himself. Kessner was watching this exchange and noted that Mord was more immature than he thought. The god of combat's grave is where the coming-of-age ceremony for the direct bloodlines is held. He thought that Mord's request seemed like a direct challenge to the direct bloodline, for an illegitimate son could not go into such a place. Kessner was about to express his disagreement, but the Archduke interrupted him right away. The Archduke mentioned that there have been several times when an outside bloodline went into the dungeon for the sake of an expedition, although not in his generation. He asked Kessner if he also wanted to go inside, but he couldn't answer. It was obvious he really wanted to come. Kessner has lived an inferior existence just because he was born illegitimate. Our MC was sure Kessner also wanted to taste the privilege of a direct bloodline. The Archduke expressed to Mord that it was still too early for him to go, and he cannot send someone unqualified there. His grace will only give him a chance to challenge the god of combat's grave the day he becomes an official warrior. In our MC's mind, becoming a warrior would not be too hard of a task. He just needed to be faster than the novel's protagonist Aiden. Mord agreed with the Archduke's suggestion, looking more determined than ever. Todd and Mord left the Archduke's training ground. After the encounter with Mord, the Archduke asked Kessner what he thought of Mord as he fought him himself. Kessner replied that he seemed like he was hiding a lot and wasn't trying his best when fighting him. The Archduke voiced that he looked like he was trying his best when taking the impulse ball. He also noticed that he seemed to have learned the body impulse on the spot. Kessner brought up that he knew other guys who learn on the spot, but the most surprising thing about Mord was his mana. He then mentioned that Mord didn't know how to control his power yet, but the level of his mana was incredible. The Archduke said his mana is comparable to Erna's. He seemed to say more, but he did not continue. Kessner asked what he was about to say, but his grace replied that it was nothing. In Archduke's mind, Mord's eyes were void of desire, in contrast to other bastard sons who were full of desire to get validation from him. He noticed how Mord takes after his mother, Reina, a lot. His Grace took note how interesting Mord was. In the Level 3 training grounds, Mord arrived and started to observe the trainees. In his mind, he almost died of boredom after being put on probation for 4 days. He heard from other trainees that 5 illegitimate Vernar children will be chosen to challenge the god of combat's grave. And since there were Sir Kessner and Viscount Owen, there'll only be 3 spots left. Mord figured that he had to hurry and become a warder. The instructor for the 3rd level entered the grounds. He asked if everyone was already present, and one trainee responded that only Fionn was missing. The instructor then ordered them to prepare for their training. The 3rd level instructor's name was Daisley. Instructor Daisley approached Mord and informed him that he cannot participate in the lessons since he just started. He then told him to ask the other trainees to catch him up after the lesson. Mord was taken aback since the instructor was not going to teach him. He then asked him which trainee would be a good choice. Daisley called him thick-skinned for making demands from him after injuring Fionn. Mord retorted that he was already punished accordingly, and pointed out that it was clearly the captain's fault, to which the instructor yelled for him to stop talking back. Mord reasoned that he was not talking back, as it is a fair request. Daisley suddenly kicked Mord. Our MC was stunned and was moved back. Instructor Daisley then held his shirt and ordered him to run laps around the grounds until the training was over. Daisley also told him to listen to the lesson while running, for he would be punished if Mord couldn't answer any questions he would ask later on. Mord was enraged and unconsciously released mana. The instructor couldn't even believe that he was extruding mana. He took this as Mord looking down on his authority as an instructor. In a decisive act, Daisley swiftly delivered a punch directly to Mord. In our MC's mind, it was sure that the authority of the instructors was absolute in this place. Instructor Daisley declared that he would kick Mord out if he tried to resist. Mord contemplated the idea of approaching the situation by engaging in a confrontation with the Daisley, but decided against it as it might interfere with him becoming a warrior. He let it go and yielded to Daisley. The power-playing instructor then commanded him to start running. Mord got really annoyed, but since he had no other choice, he immediately started to run. The instructor looked at Mord intensely. In his mind, he would make him pay for disrespecting him. After that, Daisley seemed to hold a grudge and kept punishing Mord for every little thing. He was crazed with the authority he had. If he perceived even the slightest challenge to his authority, he would mercilessly administer both verbal and physical punishments as a means of asserting his dominance. To get away with it, he called every punishment training, so no one would be able to resist. This was how Daisley ruled over the training ground. A hand was shown trembling a lot. It was our MC trying to balance himself upside down with only his thumb. Mord was sure he was being punished for extruding his mana in front of the other trainees. He was then told to stay in the same position until the end of the training. In Mord's mind, he held everything in, for he was waiting to be taught with something of value. But it seemed like he had to get some real training in. Inside a cabin, Instructor Daisley seemed to be resting. He couldn't take his mind off Mord. Maybe he was in love. This individual, driven by a desire for power, struggled to let go of Mord's tendency to speak up and challenge him. He then realized that after all the punishment he put on Mord that would have destroyed anyone's body, our MC seemed to endure them until the end. The bitter instructor wondered how an illegitimate child like Mord without any real blood or training has become such a monster. He then swore to break the mighty legitimate Vernar child. In the 3rd level training grounds, Mord expressed his desire to take the test to become a warrior to Daisley. Both Daisley and his fellow trainees questioned his sanity. Our MC confidently answered he was serious. Daisley pointed out that he hasn't learned everything he needed to become a warrior, but Mord only put the blame on him for being neglectful of his duty. He even put emphasis on the fact that there was someone not really qualified to teach. This infuriated Daisley and said he wouldn't allow Mord to take the test. Mord then challenged Daisley into a god of combat spirit. The instructor was stunned and couldn't believe what he just heard. God of combat spirit refers to the sacred practice of duels. Like all those who respect power, they also had a barbaric tradition. He who is strong is right. Therefore, if one engages in God of combat spirit, the winner would be the one in the right. Instructor Daisley asked Mord how he knew about it, and our MC responded that it didn't matter. Mord stated that according to Vernar's law, as a trainee, he could request the said combat from an instructor. And his purpose was to prove that Daisley was not qualified to be his instructor. According to the legends, the god of combat, Vernars, grew up unaware of his real identity. When he was younger, he was harassed by those drunk in power who claimed to be his instructor. Therefore, Vernars told his descendants, those who dictate over others without the ability to prove their qualifications deserve to die. For that reason, the Vernars law permits trainees to request God of Combat's spirit from their instructors. Mord even questioned this law. In his mind, the God of Combat himself was not in his right mind. Good thing though that it was beneficial for him right now. Daisley could not accept that Mord, who sees as a child, just challenged him to such a sacred ritual. He then grabbed Mord's shirt and told him that he was too inexperienced to even talk about it. But Mord reminded him that he does not have the right to deny a God of Combat's spirit. Instructor Daisley was trying to decide, while our MC waited. He then started to gather up his mana. Mord proceeded to challenge Daisley in front of all the other trainees. He even yelled for other people to hear. Our MC asked the instructor if he would accept or deny his request. He then threatened to go in public and announce what just happened, in case Daisley denied his request. The instructor himself couldn't believe how this trainee was acting. Mord then warned him that this would be his last chance, as he gathered more mana. Our MC then stated that he no longer wants to waste more time with this old man. The instructor started coughing as he inhaled some of the energy Mord emitted. Daisley was clearly threatened by Mord, but he cannot back off. For him, Mord is still just a kid, not even an official warrior. With that, he accepted Mord's request. Mord declared that the duel will start in an hour at the training grounds. But Mord immediately disagreed, for the challenger has the right to choose the time and place, and he reiterated that he didn't want to waste more time with him. Our MC then walked away from Daisley. Daisley wondered where this cycle came from. Kessner was able to hear Mord challenging Daisley to a God of Combat spirit. He was amused and wanted to witness the duel himself, so he called on a servant to arrange for him to go to the third-level training grounds. Back in the training grounds, Mord was already bored waiting for the combat to start. Some people even noticed how younger-looking he was. Daisley was clad in complete armor while Mord was still in his training suit. Our MC mocked Daisley for not running away. Daisley claimed that he will make Mord regret his arrogance. They were now facing each other. Kessner arrived at the grounds, which surprised all of them. Daisley was even more dumbfounded when he realized Mord knew Kessner. He assumed that must be why Mord was so arrogant that he had Kessner to fall back on. Kessner then asked Mord what he was thinking about challenging an instructor. Mord replied that he had no choice, as the instructor neglected his duties and seemed like his head was full of rotten thoughts. Kessner found it entertaining. He also reminded Mord to not underestimate Daisley despite being retired. Our MC thanked him for his concern, but he was sure of his win. Daisley was furious with all the disrespect. They were still waiting for another instructor as a witness, and when Kessner found out, he asked if he could take over the role of being the witness. News of Kessner being the witness immediately spread around the training grounds. This made people even more curious to know who Mord really was. Daisley could not believe that Kessner volunteered to be the witness. Kessner then asked him if he thought he was not qualified for it. Daisley put it down to the fact that he was a busy guy. Kessner took offense at Daisley calling him a guy, and asked him if he was talking down on him right now. Kessner then expressed that they are not equal just because he had him as an instructor in the past. Daisley was humiliated and apologized to him right away. Mord announced that it was already time to start. Kessner told him to better not make him regret coming all the way there. Mord and Daisley faced each other. Our MC asked if they could begin already. Daisley then pointed out that he couldn't simply use body reinforcement just like what he did with Fionn. The old man scoffs at him for not preparing enough for the duel, as he brought out his sword. The instructor wanted to see if Mord could block his sword impulse too. Mord replied that Daisley was definitely mistaken. he uttered if he really thought Mord would give his all in a fight against a trainee. Mord then geared to use body impulse, which got Daisley surprised that he already knew. Our MC launched his first attack, and the instructor immediately prepared himself for defense. The two met with each other's offenses. Mord then immediately swung his fist and Daisley was stunned. Our mighty MC pierced through Daisley's attack and sent him flying. The old man couldn't believe it himself. Just a few seconds after, Mord was already in Daisley's location. He then struck him, but Instructor Daisley was able to use his shield. The old man admitted how fitting Mord was to be a warrior, but he knew it wasn't enough to beat him. Daisley attacked back and voiced out that Mord may be strong, but experience was far more important. Daisley continued to strike Mord, while our MC seemed to struggle by the minute. The mighty Mord was grazed on his face. Instructor Daisley pointed out the fact that he already survived countless battlefields and near-death situations. He then mocked Mord's courage to request a god of combat spirit with him as the opponent. Daisley put emphasis on the fact that he was not someone Mord could look down on. Mord dodged his attack and jumped into the air, and as he landed on the ground, he admitted to himself that the instructor was right about the fact that he lacks experience. On the sidelines, Kessner continued to witness the duel. He noted that even though Mord was talented, his combat skills were still beginner level, and that experience was something that cannot be ignored. In his mind, if Mord loses, he would have to leave. He was certain Daisley would make sure of it. He then wondered what Mord would do now. Daisley